Hello, and welcome to Sway Skills. Today, we are having a short lunch webinar where we are going to talk about the questions that make a company and also some practical questions for your own leadership development. So, I'm Ashley. I am a PCC level coach. I'm also the founder and owner of Sway Leadership. I am certified in the Enneagram and teach workshops around the Enneagram and do one-on-one executive coaching. I'm also the founder of the Nine Shapes project where we have resources that we give to folks, teaching them about the Enneagram, which I have just found to be a really amazing tool when it comes to your personal development, understanding yourself, and the people in your life. So check out Nine Shapes. So, Sway Skills, what are these webinars? Well, they are workshops which bring our Sway community together. So, this is anyone who's gone through a workshop, or even if you've just, dabbled in the Enneagram or done some coaching, we'd love to have you here. And it's an opportunity to have everybody sharpen their skill sets around self-leadership. So whether that means you've gone through a more curious leadership workshop or one of our other workshops at Sway, we'd love you to just get together, meet other people who are part of our community, and sharpen those skills. So it's very casual. You just bring your lunch, curiosity. You're welcome to invite people. It's open to the public. So, what are we going to be talking about today? The questions a company asks are incredibly fundamental to its success, whether it's knowing its identity or the strategies used to meet goals and markers. Asking the right questions improves performance. It's making sure you're doing the right thing. And it fosters a culture of learning and trust. So, not just assuming we have the answers, but really making sure that people are asking questions and knowing where you're going. Something I found interesting, and this was on the Harvard Business Review, was that journalists, doctors, litigators, and other professions, they are actually taught how to ask questions in their training. But a lot of folks in business, this is not a core piece of training. And this is one of the reasons why Sway likes to come in and teach how to ask questions. So, what sort of questions do we want to ask? When do we say it? What result are we seeking? These are some of the things we're going to focus on. So, why does Sway teach organizations how to implement a coaching culture, which is a big part of the work that we do? Well, knowledge and answer culture is losing its value. We have something, the internet and iPhones, smartphones right at our fingertips. So we don't necessarily have to hold information anymore, like human beings and our ancestors had to do, such as, the epic poem, the Odyssey by Homer. That was information passed down through memory, or rabbis memorizing the Torah, having information in their head. A lot of tests had to do that way, and still are that way, where you have to memorize information and then regurgitate it. Well, now there is becoming more value on what we do with our knowledge, what we do in pursuit of inquiry rather than actually just having the answer. So, another reason we introduce coaching culture to organizations is, in short, studies and trends in organizational development show that it works. So, having a curiosity-based management style where you're asking a lot of open-ended questions has a bunch of positive benefits, such as increase in sales, higher customer engagement, lower turnover. That's a big one. So it helps with keeping employees at your company and having retention. And a big reason why, and you'll see as we get to the end of the webinar, I have questions that managers should be asking their employees, is when you are having the coaching skill set at your work, you're encouraging people to use their own resources, to find their own answers. And they become more engaged. They become more invested in their work and the process. So this is one of the reasons why, or many of the reasons why we introduce coaching cultures to organizations. So, how we do that? Well, in short, we teach people skills on both listening and asking productive, powerful questions. So, this webinar, we're focusing on questions, but we can't get there until we talk about listening. So, there are three levels of listening. And if you've gone to any Sway workshops, we usually cover this. So this is just a quick refresher. Level one, listening, it's just when you're receiving information. Level two listening, two-way listening, where you're receiving information, but you're also thinking, well, how does this relate to me? What information do I need to share here? And level three listening is intuitive gut check listening, where you're listening with your entire senses and you're fully engaged in what the person is saying. And then you bring it back to you, but it's really focusing on the other. Now, all of these levels of listening have their time and place where they're helpful. Level three listening is where we want to focus when we're doing any sort of transformational change, conflict resolution, our annual reviews, or one-on-ones with our managers or employees. Level three listening is where we want to be when we ask powerful questions, when we ask those questions that shape our industry and our company. So, some listening blockers, things that get in the way of listening. Um, it might be having our cell phone out, or not getting a good night's sleep, or not eating well, right? There's all these things that get our attention and keep us from listening. But we want to be sure to take care of ourselves so we can listen to what we need, what our organization might be saying. What are trends that I want to be paying attention to? Who am I not listening to that it might be important? So, how can you show up present? Take care of yourself. It's such a big one, but it's hard, right? So, making sure that, in between meetings, you're getting up and stretching or having a glass of water, going for a walk, and be aware and intentional of what voices are shaping you. So, what are the things that you're consuming in your mind? Making sure that you have some positivity or uplifting messages, so you have some good mental health, because that affects how we listen. Curiosity is a muscle that we can build. And this is really good news because if you find yourself going through some of the exercises and having a hard time asking open-ended questions, asking questions that affect the team or bring people to aha moments, if you're finding it hard to do, don't worry, you can build this muscle. And actually, the main advice I give people is to start making all of your questions just open-ended. And we'll go over that in just a moment. And an open-ended question is one that leads someone to deeper curiosity and not a yes/no response. So that's one thing that you can do. You can also spend time in solitude, in silence. Challenge yourself. Open up your blind spots. What is that inner voice of yours not telling you? What's the whole story? What does that inner voice of yours need? Really be able to feel your emotions and get curious about them, right? If you're angry, it's for a reason. It's teaching you something about passion and boundaries, what you want to say yes to and what you want to say no to. Fear, it's teaching you about things to pay attention to and what to be aware of, right? Sadness, it's teaching you about what you care about, what's important. These are all important things to listen to. So spend time with yourself and without your phone, maybe without people. Um, you know, uh, I saw someone ask the question, how would the world be different if all of our world leaders spent an hour of solitude a day? So learn your voice through self-observation. Also, community is important. Listen to the land that you live on. What are species in the area that you're familiar with? What's the history of the land that you're on? What about the people who've lived there? What has civilization looked like? Get curious. Ask questions without needing to find answers, and also be pleasantly surprised with the answers that you find. But pay attention to the space that you're physically in. So, part two, speaking. Listening is the foundation to what we say. How to ask productive questions, making sure that they're opened. There is a time for a closed-ended question, which, like I already shared, produces a yes, no answer. But if we really want people to open up, if we want to have influence and weight in having powerful questions, making them open is a great way to start. When we ask closed-ended questions, our neurological pathways are actually trained to shut down because the brain, as it evolves, it doesn't want to burn calories. It wants to preserve energy, so it wants to say no. So asking open questions just kind of challenges our brains and gets us into like a more expansive thinking. So asking open-ended questions, we want to make sure that they are non-judgmental, not leading in the advice of a question, or not leading and giving advice in this form of a question. Like a closed, judgmental question could be, have you thought of going to counseling? Maybe changing that and saying something like, what resources do you have access to that could help you here? Right. And then just being genuinely curious. I think that's something that we miss often, but when we're paying attention to our company, when we're paying attention to our team, saying, what are you really curious about here? And then asking that question. I like to say that a good question makes the other's world larger and not smaller, and that's a good indicator of just if it's a powerful question or not. It's like, are you shrinking someone's world? Or are you making it larger? Productive questioning can be really simple. What do you want to talk about? What's missing? What do you need? And this is a good example of like a zooming out question. Maybe instead of going into a meeting and saying, you know, uh, that thing that we talked about last week, how are you feeling about it? Because that might not be relevant to the team anymore. So asking those zoom out questions. Some other zoom out questions. What will happen if nothing changes? These are two that actually I pulled from some companies that I work with. What would it look like for the Enneagram to be a common lexicon in our organization? This was from a company who loved the Enneagram so much, and they wanted it to just be fluent and frequent in how people talked about things. They liked the idea of we all have strengths and weaknesses, and not using it as a badge, but using it more as an opportunity to explain how we work to one another. This is from blueberries. How can blueberries be a household fruit for families making less than 100K? And I loved this question because it was so specific, but also very zoomed out and encapsulating of what their mission and vision was. So you want to ask those zoom out perspective questions when people need to recenter on the why, and just what the purpose is, what the mission is. Another trick for asking powerful questions for your company is zooming in. So this is when people know where they're heading and they just need to figure out how to get there and what are the steps. So some questions could be, what needs to happen day to day to make this possible? What resources do we have? What resources don't we have and then we need? Who on your team could you ask for help? If it's not possible to change the income of every household, what do we have power over? What can we influence? And these are questions that who really drive the mission forward and make it action oriented and not just like theoretical and thinking, but very like hands-on and grounded. So, screenshot these questions. I also thought it would be helpful for you to have like pocket questions. If you're a manager and you are having consistent one-on-ones with your employee, I think that this is a great model. I worked for a university, and my boss, the director, would send out actually similar questions to these that we had to fill out before our meeting. And so we came to the meeting with these questions answered and emailed. So also the director or the manager could have time to process what the person was sharing. Um, but some questions that I like that you should be consistently asking your employees are, what are we celebrating? Um, what's going well? What's working right now? And what's not working? What obstacles are you facing? And where do you need support? And where do you not need support? You don't need me to micromanage. You feel good there. Employees, ask your managers these questions. So screenshot these as well. What should we prioritize this season? I can't say it enough. So many times I'm coaching people, VPs and directors who are just so in the middle of they're leading people, but then they're also managing up and working with their boss, the CEO or president, and they don't know what to prioritize. They don't know what's most important. Um, and you can ask your managers these questions. What development areas would you like me to focus on? Right? What are they seeing in you? Ask for that feedback often and get curious. What training and education is available for my role? So, oftentimes, people are not fully using the benefits that they have available through their HR, and it's would be very wise for you to take advantage of training, education. Some companies I work with, they offer gym passes and wellness credits. Um, and if you know, right when you're onboarding, you might have gotten familiar with those, but you might not be fully taking advantage of them. So ask about that. And if they're not available, be a trailblazer. Asking the question simply puts it on your manager's radar that these things can be possible and would benefit the organization. And lastly, ask what you're simply curious about. Again, building that curiosity muscle, you might be asking your boss, where do you want to see the company in 5 years? A zoom out question. How would you say, how would my job be successful in your eyes? Right? Kind of getting some information from them. So, the exercise that I want to give you all today is to write down a question in each of these categories. What's a question you're asking for your industry? What about your company, your organization? A question for your department, so just your unique team, and a question for yourself. Sway is really big on that self leadership. What do you have control over? What's in your small garden of control? And the more that you invest energy in that, you'll realize that you have more of an impact. So, as you're developing these questions, here's some things that could be helpful. You're like, does this question need to be a zooming in or a zooming out question? Right? Maybe it's for your industry. So, for example, Sway, we are in professional and personal development. So, what's a question that I can ask for my industry? Um, and off the top of my head, I think it would be a zooming out question. I'm curious of what actually works when it comes to transformation of people, because patterns and habits are really hard to change. So, what actually works, right? So, again, think about your industry, ask a question. Um, how can you make your question open-ended? So, going to company or the organization, um, thinking about, again, I'll use Sway as an example. What's an open-ended question that we can ask? Um, what are resources that customers want? What are the values of my customers, right? Instead of maybe saying, would my customer value more Sway skills? Maybe that's an okay question, but a more powerful question could be, what type of events would people like? Right. And then your department, thinking about your individual team. Um, what are the questions that you're afraid to ask? Right? Get brave. It's just you watching this video. Write down those questions and keep it simple. Um, we can maybe get kind of verbose and poetic in our questions. That's fine. But actually, the most powerful questions I find are quite simple. What do I need? How do I get there? And when you're asking those self-leadership questions, yeah, just tune inward and how can I grow this season? What do I want to focus on? Um, what's in my arena of control? So ask that question. I'm curious to hear the questions that you all come up with. You're welcome to share them with me, Ashley, with two E's, at swayleadership.com. And I hope you found this exercise helpful and this PowerPoint helpful. We are going to be doing Sway Skills monthly to bi-monthly. So look at swayleadership.com, hop on our mailing list, and we'll be in touch. I'll see you all at the next Sway Skills.